Strong people come from tough circumstances. And it is up to you to decide what your journey will ultimately define about you. So can you believe it? After 5 years of dreaming this, it's finally here. I'm at Johnson & Wales University for my first TEDx talk. I cannot wait to share my journey with you. There's a lot to learn from. So on that note, come and join me. I was 14 years old when I received my last beating, and I moved out of my parents' home. Today, I am 41 years old, and I have been long at this adulting journey. You see, I came from a family of physical and mental abuse, and amongst other traumas. I am the oldest out of 5. And my parents used their broken tools to raise me. I was raised in a very strict home. I was not allowed to go out much, and so I didn't make much friends. And the friends that I did make, I made at school, and they were the source of happiness for me. I was the only girl, I was the oldest and a girl, so my parents were very tough. I used to cut school a lot around this time because I found that with my friends, I had the freedom to laugh, to be happy, and to have fun. One day, I cut school, again to be with my friends, and my school called my stay-at-home mom. And they told her that I hadn't been in school for 2 days. So as you could imagine, she was a ball of fire. We lived in an apartment on the first floor, and we had a basement, and the access to the basement was within our unit. And when I got home that day, immediately after I walked in, my mother grabbed me by the back of my head, opened the basement door, and flung me into the darkness of 30 some odd stairs down to the bottom of the level. When I was rolling down the stairs, I tucked my body in and I rolled down, and when I finally got to the concrete floor, I checked to make sure that my body parts were all still there. And with the exception of a couple of splinters on my back and on my arms, I fared off pretty well. And I was very excited about that. Then the lights came on, and both my parents came downstairs to meet me. My father, who I feel his only fault was the fact that he loved my mother to oblivion, came downstairs, grabbed me by the arm, dragged me across to the basement, the center of the basement, and made me kneel down on the concrete floor while he held me down by my shoulders. My mother, who had gone to the corner of the basement, grabbed a hold of an industrial broom and charged at me and my body relentlessly. She was full of an anger that I will never be able to describe. And she said 2 phrases to me that have defined me in my life. You will never amount to anything, and you are the worst thing that has come out of me. The beating went on, and I became numb, and at some point, she ended up hitting my head, which caused me to start bleeding down my face. At that point, my father realized what was going on. He came to, shoved my mother out of the way, lifted me up to my feet, and pushed me towards the stairs and told me to go upstairs and clean up. At that moment, something very powerful happened to me. Not only did they break me as a child, but they empowered me as a human being, because the next day when I left that house for the last time, I swore and I made my life's journey to prove that she was wrong. And not for nothing, I think I've done pretty decent. But my struggles didn't start there. No, actually. I was born in Colombia. And at 5 years old, my parents decided they wanted a better life. So they bought tickets to the Bahamas, and we went to the Bahamas. They paid off a local fisherman to smuggle us into the country with his rickety boat across the Atlantic Ocean, where we almost found death. But we got to the shores of Miami Beach, and our new chapter started there. We moved to New Jersey after a while, and at the age of 8, since we were all illegal, my parents and myself got deported back to what the government was calling my home. But here I was, thinking New Jersey was my home. Nonetheless, we went to Colombia, and we tried to make the best out of acclimating ourselves to that new life. And it proved to be a failed effort. So my parents decided that they were going to go ahead and take another chance at this United States dream. And this time, we ended up coming through the Mexican border. I can still vividly recall the howling of the wolves as they were very close when we crossed at night. We walked at night. Or the rattling of the snakes when we hid in ditches during the day. I was never allowed to ask why we were there, where we were going, or what we were going to do. I was only told to walk. One night, we were on our last journey, our last trip of the journey, and the coyote, who is this person that traffics one side to the other, shoved 16 people into a car and started to go through the last bit of our trip. And within a few miles, he came to a screeching halt, and he stopped the car, and he starts yelling, get out, you've been caught." I was in the backseat passenger, and the last one scurrying out. And at 8 years old, when I was trying to scurry out, I lost one of my favorite purple shoes. And as any 8-year-old would do, I went back to grab it. But by the time I turned around, there was a rifle to my face and a screaming police officer on the other end of it. My mother was face down on the ground with another officer at her back, and there were other kids that were on the ground crying. My dad had made it to the bushes in the back a few yards away, and he and along the other people were hiding in the back. I managed to confuse the hell out of the officer when I volunteered to translate for my mother and the police officer. She didn't speak any English. So he turned to me and he said, "Why is it that you speak English?" And my answer was, "Because I don't belong here." My dad came out from out of the bushes and surrendered himself, and simultaneously the other passengers ran in the opposite direction to what they would then call freedom. My family and I were arrested and were taken to a jail in Arizona. You see, you are looking at a face of an immigrant. Growing up was hard. My dad was the only breadwinner of the house that now turned into a party of 6. He did the best he could to provide a living. My mother dictated pretty much how our lives were going to be. And she was the one that wore the pants in the family. She, also trying to deal with her childhood trauma, found comfort in becoming a severe hoarder. And her actions were laced with anger and with malice. My parents fought often, and they fought often, and things got very ugly many, many times. By this time, the U.S. had given us immunity, but my dad's paperwork was still lost in the mix. So my parents figured that they were going to try to make this better living in Florida, where we had a family member that was doing pretty decent. To me, I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to start a new life. A few weeks after having arrived here, we realized we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This family member had gotten himself caught and involved in a very bad deal, a very bad situation, and he was in a lot of trouble. And so his house was raided, and this is a house that we were staying at, which meant we were caught in the mix. The police officers came and they raided the house, and they arrested every single one of the adults on site, which included my parents. I, at 11 years old, ended up going to a temporary orphanage where they place kids whose parents have been detained. Again, I was never able to ask why, or why me. Within a couple of months, a friend of ours took me out of the temporary orphanage and my siblings into her care. One day, her and her friend decided that they wanted to go to the mall. And the friend's husband said, "Why are you going to take the kids with you? Leave them here. I'll take care of them." So as they left, this man said to us, "Let's play hide and go seek." And as the younger girls ran to go hide, he grabbed my hand and said, "You'll hide with me." He took me to his bedroom where his 1-month-old slept in the middle of the bed. He sat me at first at the edge of the bed, and then he laid me at the edge of the bed. And then he got on top of me at the edge of the bed and touched my private body. I was paralyzed in fear, but somehow, some way, I managed to let go of his grip, and I wiggled out of there, and as I was running towards the door, he screamed at me, "You better not tell anybody, because nobody's going to believe you." Later that night, I told my sister about it. She was a younger sister. And what she said to me was, "You probably made this up. You just wanted attention." A few months after that, my parents were cleared of any wrongdoing, wrong place, wrong time, and we all reunited and moved down to another place in South Florida. And at one point, my sister decided to share with my parents what I had shared with her happened to me that night. My parents lost their minds. They gave me the beating of a lifetime and said that if I hadn't said anything to them was because I looked for it and I wanted it. They also didn't believe me when I told them that I had been molested. They thought I had been raped, and therefore I was lying about that as well. So they took me into an exam doctor's office to get checked for rape. Because I was a minor, they couldn't perform the exam that is usually done for rape victims. And instead, they had to use alternate orifices to verify the violation, to prove that I was all along telling the truth. The exam itself ended up being the rape. After I moved out, I acquired a lot of titles. I graduated high school, I got married at 19, I got cheated on, I got divorced, and then I found life. Ironically enough, after my failed suicide attempt. I had come to the edge of my pain, and I knew that dying was probably going to just feel much better. But what I didn't know was that life had something much, much bigger for me. You see, when women have kids, they give life to their child. For me, my child gave life to me. And it wasn't until then that I realized the responsibility that I had to live my life on purpose instead of being a victim of circumstance. I was always afraid to have a kid because I figured I wouldn't even know what to do with him, how to raise him. But let me tell you something, there is something very powerful and very miraculous when you're holding a child in your hand and that child is looking right back at you and smiling at you and knowing that you are all that they have. Unconditional, unwavering, loving, and loyal. I had all the broken tools to raise this kid, but guess what? I chose to use new tools. And I didn't have all the answers, but I certainly was going to figure them out. And you know what? I didn't do too shabby. My son, my life, my soul, today he is a 19-year-old, respectable young man attending a very distinguished university, figuring out the chapters of his life. I became a single mom somewhere along the way, and our lives were far from easy. But even through the struggles we went through them together, and we created a bond that withstands any hardships. I'm a huge advocate for psychotherapy. I'll give you an example. If your arm hurts, you go to the doctor to figure out what's wrong. If you get into an accident, you go to physical therapy to get better. So what happens when your injury is emotional or mental? Why don't we treat that with the same effect? Sometimes we just need someone from the outside to look in and organize and help you figure out this inner chaos that you've been put in. Throughout my life, I have found many forms and many people that have been therapy for me. And most of them till today don't even know the miracles that they did for me when they gave me one small gesture of kindness. Diane McMillan. She was my counselor during high school. And her mothering, nurturing, caring attitude towards me walked me off the edge many times when I was done. And she saw a worth in me that I hadn't yet discovered. Deborah Petrucker. She was the therapist that I used for 5 years who turned my tormenting nightmares into a virtual library of organized experiences that I was able to pluck and choose at my control. Hence the reason I can share these stories with you today and not freak out. There are people out there in your life today that are ready to show you the light that you need. You just have to be open for the challenge and ready to take that hard road of bettering yourself. There's a saying out there that goes like this: anger is like drinking the poison but expecting the other person to die. You would think that me growing up, I grew up being abusive, angry, resentful, violent, but I actually did not. Don't get me wrong. I have plenty of issues. My therapist will tell you that right now. Actually, she won't because of that disclosure thing. But to the contrary, my ability to forgive brought me peace and brought me happiness. I learned that we all come to a fork in our roads where we are prompted with a choice. Do I follow the template or do I create my own? Unfortunately, my parents' limited education caused them to fall default to the template that they were given when they were children. So I had to learn to accept that they played that role in my life as best as they could so that I can learn something from it, not to be them. I also learned that forgiveness opens your heart out to people that are ready to love you, to respect you, and to appreciate for everything that you are and your worth. With every breaking point in my life, I could have and should have had every right to become a statistic. But guess what? I chose not to. I live my life with passion and I appreciate every part of my life. And today I have new titles. I'm an artist. I did modeling. I became an interior designer. I travel. I live my life with purpose. Difficult circumstances are life's gifts. They truly are. Because I'll tell you, with everything I have done and everything that I have lived through, I would not change one single thing. Why? Because I am who I am today because of it. Strong people come from tough circumstances. And it is up to you to decide what your journey will ultimately define about you. Thank you. So I just finished my first TEDx talk, and let me tell you, I thought this was going to be just as easy as telling my story, but it was even powerful for me. I can't wait, like I said, to share it with you. It will be definitely something to motivate you and inspire you to move forward.